Hello everyone, it is me Sasha Kawaii Cat, and in today's video, I'll be looking at two free Procreate alternatives, Infinite Paint and High Paint. Both these apps have been described as being very similar to Procreate. Both are also free as opposed to Procreate, which I believe I paid like £9 for. Infinite Paint and High Paint being completely free already gives them a win in my book. Procreate is of course a lot of people's go-to app, however not everyone can afford it. Both High Paint and Infinite Paint have elements that remind people of Procreate, so I'll be taking a look to see how true that is, as well as which one is the best alternative. The first app we'll be taking a look at today is Infinite Paint. This app is available for free. I don't remember if I purchased anything for Infinite Paint, so I'm not sure which version I'm using. There are some apps that are free, but you have to pay to unlock additional features. Like in IBISPAINT X, you have to pay to unlock additional brushes. But regardless, you can still use this app for free without purchasing anything. The first thing I want to talk about is the layout of Infinite Paint. I think that Infinite Paint has a similar layout to Procreate without being a complete knockoff. For instance, if you look at an app like Bank Paint and IBISPAINT X as well, they have a more distinct look when it comes to their design and layout, while I do think the way apps like Infinite Paint and Procreate have the tools laid out and features hidden have a sense of similarity. For instance, the way the brush library on Infinite Paint is organized into different categories is also something that Procreate does. They also have similar brushes available for you to use. I do like most of the brushes that are available, but I will say I did have some difficulty finding a decent brush for doing line art. That said, there are certain tools that are definitely organized and displayed very differently on both apps. For instance, the editing tools are a lot more easily accessible on Infinite Paint. I actually think that I like the layout of certain features in Infinite Paint more than Procreate. I find the look of Infinite Paint to be more aesthetically pleasing, if that makes sense. I like how everything is displayed and how easy it is to access everything. It might be a bit hard to understand it all at first if you're new to digital art, because there's quite a lot available, so it might become a bit overwhelming. But the more you use the app, eventually you will become familiar with it. Let's move on to the drawing process. So for this process, I tried to find a pencil type brush to draw this beautiful character. I didn't have a specific theme for her design. I kind of just wanted to draw a pretty girl with a sort of magical feel to her. The sketching process was pretty straightforward, but once I got to the inking, it wasn't easy to find a brush to use. Usually I would use a more smooth brush, but because I couldn't find one that gave me the look and results I wanted, I ended up using a more rough pencil type brush. It didn't look bad, but it definitely wasn't my particular style. Either way, I will say that I do think that it looked relatively okay. I'm not mad at the way the line art turned out. It looks fine, I guess. The coloring process, however, was a whole other thing. I actually used a fill type brush because the fill tool on Infinite Paint unfortunately really sucks. It's just really bad, which is disappointing because the Procreate fill tool is pretty decent. Another way I could have colored was by using the select tool, but that was also disappointing. But to be honest, Procreate isn't much better in my opinion, so there isn't much of a difference there. But anyway, as I mentioned, I ended up using this fill tool type brush, which thankfully was pretty decent. The coloring process wasn't as smooth as it is when I use Procreate, but the results were not bad and it wasn't exactly difficult to color once I figured out the right tool to use. As for some additional features, you can export your drawing process as a speed paint, which is great if you want to share it online. I couldn't find an animating feature, which is disappointing because I like that feature in Procreate and I use it once in a while. But overall, I do like Infinite Paint, and I think it's a pretty decent free Procreate alternative. The layout is similar to Procreate as well as some of the features, and I think my drawing turned out pretty good. So let's talk about HiPaint. HiPaint's layout and design is a lot more similar to Procreate, to the point where you have to ask, how did they get away with this? I guess it doesn't matter since a lot of these apps tend to have a certain similarity to them, but I will say this one is a lot more obvious. That said, I do like the layout, and because it's so similar to Procreate, it already feels very familiar, making it pretty easy to navigate. However, I will say that it being this similar means that there's nothing really distinct about it and nothing that I can point to and say HiPaint is doing this significantly better than other apps. It really does feel like a knockoff of Procreate, but like a lesser version of Procreate. That said, Procreate is already a pretty decent app, so it being dissimilar in the design and layout isn't exactly a bad thing. A lot of the brushes are the same and a lot of the tools are available and accessed in a similar manner to Procreate. However, looking similar doesn't necessarily mean they are the same quality, if that makes sense. Procreate's tools are a lot better, is what I'm trying to say. For instance, this app doesn't have that feature where you drag the color to fill in your line art like Procreate does, and that's a feature that I really like on Procreate. I guess HiPaint can't copy everything, but I kind of wish that they copied this one thing since it's really good. Now, let's talk about the drawing process. So I decided to do a floral themed character. I really like this design and I like how it turned out. I like what I came up with. I think she looks very cute and very pretty. I also like the colors I chose. Lots of yellow and pink, which I think are very nice colors and is a very nice color combination. I also found a really nice pencil type brush for sketching. I did my beautiful sketch and I thought it looked great. However, during the process, I had to constantly deal with this app repeatedly crashing. And I do mean repeatedly. It was not fun. It was actually very frustrating, but I pushed through and I did my sketch, which I think turned out okay. I really have to make it clear. Sketching on this was fine. The brushes themselves are great. The drawing process without the app crashing would have been smooth. The app itself is just very unstable. It's very, very buggy. That said, I found a very good brush for doing my line art as well, certainly better than Infinite Paint. It looks very good to me, but of course the app kept crashing as I mentioned before. It felt like every second it would close and I had to reopen it and go back to my drawing, which thankfully, despite the fact that I never saved, was still available. I guess because it saves automatically. Once I moved on to the coloring process, it was pretty straightforward as well. I didn't like the fill tool that's available and the select tool certainly wasn't any better. I mentioned these tools because I often use them in my coloring process since it tends to make the coloring process a lot easier for me, but overall I do think that coloring it wasn't too difficult. Again, the only real issue was how buggy this app was. It kept crashing so much that I got worried about losing my drawing and I decided to actually save. And unfortunately that was a bad idea because after trying to save, the app crashed yet again and I lost my coloring process. I came back to my drawing and all my work was missing. Those layers that I had my flat colors on were just gone, like they never existed. And you know what? I'm not even mad. As soon as I started using the app, I knew that whatever similarities it had to Procreate wasn't going to make up for how buggy it was, but I kind of just pushed through for the sake of this review. I will say this, if you manage to use this app without it crashing on you, it's probably going to be a pretty decent experience. It's probably going to give you decent results. It's not a bad app for me. It was just very buggy. I will say I was using it on my iPad. It is also available for free on Android, so maybe Android users will have a better time than I did. Last and certainly not least, I'm going to talk about Procreate for a little bit. So because my drawing got messed up in HiPaint, instead of trying to complete it while still using the app, I decided to finish the coloring process in Procreate, and it was such a smoother process. It's so much easier to color in Procreate, and I already had these nice sparkle brushes available for the background. I feel like my drawing turned out really good, and I'm so happy I didn't force myself to finish this in HiPaint because I know I would have eventually gotten genuinely mad about the whole thing. And I will say HiPaint used to be the app Huey and Sketch. I'm not sure what happened there, but it's obvious it's the same app, and I remember having the same issues back when I reviewed that app a few years back. I wasn't sure if it was the app or the fact that I was using a very low-end Android tablet at the time, and I think it was the app. It was always the app, and it's wild that years later it's the same issue. You'd think they would fix that by now. As it relates to Procreate, I understand a lot of people want a free alternative because it is a pretty decent app. But to be honest, I still to this day use IBISPAINT X more than I use Procreate. Procreate isn't even my main drawing app, so don't beat yourself up about it if you can't afford it. There are numerous free alternatives beyond Infinite Paint and High Paint that you can still use to make pretty decent art. But anyway, these are the finished drawings. I think they both turned out pretty good, but please comment below and let me know what you think. If you have a main drawing app that you use that is free, that you think is a decent alternative to Procreate, please feel free to share that in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like my art and you'd like to show your support, you can always donate to my Ko-fi account or become a patron. The links to those are always in the description below. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!